I'm going to share with you one trick that's going to really help you when you're painting in watercolour using wet in wet techniques. It could be a real game changer. Let's get started. So I'm mixing up here a little bit of cadmium yellow pale, a big puddle, and I'm pretty much sticking to primary colours to start with. So once I've got that, I'm going to start mixing up an orange colour. So I'm using a little bit of Winsor Red, and I've added it to the yellow and I'm mixing it so you've got sort of a light orange there, making a little bit of a deeper orange here just by adding more red paint. And it's slightly thicker because I'm going to start off with wet and wet washes, and as I add more colours they won't be as wet, so they won't run as fast, so you won't end up with mud. I'm mixing up a puddle of cerulean. Always make sure you have plenty of paint. You don't want to run out halfway through. I'm also going to mix up a puddle of cobalt blue. You can use ultramarine, and I will list some alternative colours in the description below. And finally some red to finish off, and these are going to be for the reflections and for the sky. So I am wetting the sky and the water area. What I would say, if you find this a little bit daunting and you're a beginner, you may want to paint your sky first and let that dry and then paint your reflection, so you have more time and more control. And spend a little bit of time wetting the paper and allow the water to soak through the membranes, and it will give you more time to paint. And now I'm painting, starting off with the yellow, and I've sort of left a circle there of white paper for the sun, and that's getting a little bit smaller now. You can have that as small or as large as you want, make it your own. So it's a big sort of lot of yellow there, and I'm painting the reflection area. Again, you may want to leave this for later and just concentrate on the sky, and then you can come back to this part of the video and then just paint the water. And I'm just softening that edge there of the sun with a clean damp brush. And now I'm adding that sort of lighter orange colour wet into wet with my size 10 round brush, and I'm doing the same in the water, left and right of the lighter yellow, leaving that stripe of white in the middle to represent the reflection of the sun. Adding the stronger orange now to the sides of the reflection there, wet into wet, and doing the same in the sky area. So I'm working light to dark, and it's a traditional way of working in watercolour, so it's a good guide. So I'm just adding a little bit more orange, damp into wet here and there, so the paint isn't as wet as that lighter yellow. I've got less water. I've just mixed up a stronger orange now, adding more red to the yellow, and just painting around the top of that orange colour, and in the water painting damp into wet there. I actually painted too much yellow to the right hand side there, so I'm going to lift it off with a paper towel, and I'm also going to dilute it a little bit just to get rid of the yellow there with a clean damp brush, and wipe it off again because I wanted to add some blue there and I didn't want it to go too green. So I'm starting off with the red, and I'm going to put the red next to the yellow so it doesn't sort of contaminate the blue to turn it green. It's almost like a barrier. So I'm just sort of softening and blending with a little bit more of the orange colour. So I hope that was helpful, just to show you how to get out of trouble sometimes, just by lifting off with a paper towel and diluting with clean water. So I've added my blue there, and I've also mixed the blue with the red. So I'm just showing you here on the left hand side, if you just add the blue on top of that yellow, you can see it turns quite green looking there. So it's just these little things that can be helpful when you're painting or starting out in watercolour, and showing you how to rectify them. So I'm adding a little bit of red orange there over that sort of green just to disguise it. Another way you can do that. And I'm just adding a little bit more of that red orange damp into wet to kind of show the reflection of the trees there. And I'm using vertical lines to represent those sort of tree trunks as well. So I've mixed up a red orange, that's about 70% red, 30% yellow. And as you can see, there's not as much water there. I'm using my size 8 brush, and I'm painting damp into damp now, the reflections, but also the water's edge and the land here. So I've got some nice bright colours. Adding a little bit more orange at the top there, so added a bit more yellow to that red orange. So it's about 50% red, 50% yellow. Now my sky has dried off a little bit. It's damp, but it's not dry. So I'm spritzing very gently the sky with my spritzer bottle, just with clean water. And this is my game changer technique. It's as simple as that. Just give a light, misty sort of spritz to an area where it's dried off a little bit, and it will just give you the opportunity to carry on painting wet into wet. As you can see here, it really has rescued my painting. The yellow is probably drier than the paint that I've just applied, but that's okay. Just keep tilting and you will get the sort of results you want. You just got to kind of be patient with it. You may need to have another little spritz. Just be careful not to over spritz, because sometimes you can introduce puddles and then you lose control. So just give a light misty sort of spritz, and do practice that as well. It's so helpful, and I've seen a lot of professional artists using this technique, and at first I thought that can't work, but it really does work. Remember to keep tilting as well. So I'm just pulling down some reflections here and there, and I'm adding the cerulean at the top there, trying to make sure there's no yellow there, and I'm using the cobalt blue here to the left hand side, so it's an orange or a red orange, no yellow, because the yellow may go green with the blue. And I'm tilting now. And you can tilt up to 90 degrees, get that paint moving, and if it's not moving enough, just give it a little spritz, which is what I'm doing here, and then carry on tilting. I'm actually going to spritz off the water on the right and left hand side, the reflections here. I wasn't happy with them, they looked a bit muddy. So I'm spritzing it off. I'm not even touching the paper with my brush, and I'm just applying fresh cobalt blue, and then cobalt blue mixed with red, so it creates a barrier between that yellow and the blue so it doesn't turn green. And I'm applying that sort of violet colour to the left hand side as well. Wet into wet. And because I spritzed the sky area where the sun was, I lost the white of the sun. So I've just lifted off with my paper towel to get that light back there. So that's quite effective. And you can do the same in the water reflection as well. So I decided to add a little bit more dark to the top of the sky to create depth in my painting, using the cobalt blue with a pinch of the red, damp into damp, and I'm tilting there just to get the paint sort of blending on the paper without having to touch it with my brush, which is great. And you can apply a little bit more sort of paint to the left and the right just to add a few more interesting clouds to that sunset sky. So while the painting's damp, I'm mixing up some quinacridone rust. You can use burnt sienna, and I'm mixing that with the cobalt blue. I'm going to paint the land area damp into damp here with my size 10 round brush. And because the paint's damp, it doesn't run too much. It doesn't run into the water or into the sky. If you find it's running too much, take the excess paint off on the paper towel to control the amount of paint on your brush. You want the consistency to be quite creamy. I've mixed up a little bit of red here with that dark brown colour, and I'm painting this damp into damp just to create some colour variety on the land area that I previously painted but had spritzed away. So you may still have a little bit of residue of that left over, and if you do, just carry on working light to dark, adding those darks. As you can see, I did at the water's edge there. So just adding a little bit more creamier dark at the bottom. I've added some Paynes grey to the quinacridone rust, and I'm adding a little bit of dark with the tip of my brush just around the sun area. The sun is the star of the show, and I really want to bring it out by painting my darkest dark against the lightest light there. So I am using that dark now, and I'm painting the foliage of the trees damp into damp in the sky. So if the sky is too wet and the paint runs too much, wait a little bit longer. You saw there I used the paper towel as well to take the excess paint off. So it's a lovely way of painting this because you get some lovely soft edges. So I haven't actually dried my painting at all. I'm creating a really lovely atmospheric effect by using these wet in wet and damp into wet and damp into damp techniques. So as you can see there, just by using the cobalt blue with the quinacridone rust, you get these lovely soft sort of darks for the foliage there, which are silhouetted against that sky. and I'm using that paper towel to control my brush all of the time. And you can vary the colours as well. You can add a little bit more rust or a little bit more blue, or you can even add a touch of Paynes grey as well, just to make that colour even darker. So I am painting the tree trunks and branches damp into damp with my size 4 round brush using the quinacridone rust. You can use burnt sienna, and Paynes grey. You could even use black or ultramarine just to get that lovely dark colour. If you find this a little bit daunting, you could paint the tree trunks and branches once the painting is dry. I find it really helpful to turn the painting to the side to paint branches and tree trunks, or any sort of thin long lines. It's really helpful, especially if you find your hand shakes a little bit. You can sort of rest your hand on the side and you're nearest to the painting. And you can also turn your painting upside down and do the same thing. I quite like this. I like to pull the brush towards me rather than away from me. I feel that I've got more control this way. So the painting really has dried off a little bit. I haven't actually blow dried it. There is moisture in the paper, but I'm using side brush, dry brush. So the paint is very creamy, not much water, and I'm using the belly of the brush to create some textured foliage here. You may want to practice this technique, but it is really helpful. And what I'm doing now is just adding a few more branches here to the left hand side and a few more tree trunks, just building up that detail with these sort of dark washes now. So that's the Paynes grey with the quinacridone rust and not very much water. So I'm now adding some reflections, so it's literally mirrored reflections, so I'm just going straight down from the tree above. So I'm keeping them as vertical as I can, or just sort of copying the direction of the tree. Now, as you notice here, the painting has dried in the water area. That's a very dry brush effect, which happens when the painting is dry. It's not what I want though. I want some soft reflections. So I'm having a think what to do while I paint a little bit more foliage in the tree there. And I'm adding some more reflections and sort of asking myself, shall I just leave it like this? How am I going to get this to look softer? And it's so dry. So I thought to myself, just get my spritzer bottle out again, soften it. Hopefully it won't sort of disturb the sort of sunset colours underneath, and it doesn't. I just very gently spritz it, and I can then blend and soften those reflections. Now this to me is a game changer. I sort of knew this, but I just didn't want to disturb the sunset colours, and just by going easy and just having a soft spritz, you can soften those sort of hard edge reflections and just carry on. And this is wonderful, especially if you're a wet and wet painter like me. And I haven't actually thoroughly dried this painting yet, so this is just pretty much my first stage. So I'm delighted with those lovely soft reflections, and I'm just adding some more detail to the trees there with quite creamy colour, again using the belly of my brush. That's the middle of the brush, using the side of the brush. And what happens when you use the side, the paint doesn't flow out as easily as it does from the top. But remember, you can use your paper towel to control the amount of paint on your brush as well. So as you can see here, I'm building up the detail on the left, painting damp into damp with my size 4 round brush. Do use the brush that you feel comfortable with. So adding a little bit more dark here, the Paynes grey. I think I've got a pinch of red in there as well. I like to vary my darks. I don't want just one flat dark colour. And I've decided to add some horizontal reflections here to represent the foliage. So I'm painting this damp into damp with the dark and using my size 4 round brush. I would say with water especially, less is more. You don't want to paint every little detail because you will lose your light. It's the same with skies as well. It's very tempting to add more detail, but you end up with no light at all. I've decided to use the spritzer bottle again. The painting hasn't dried, so I can spritz the paint off, and I just wanted to create more light in the centre for more impact, to lead the eye into the painting. I'm just taking off any puddles at the bottom of the painting. So I still haven't dried my painting yet, but I'm adding some darks and details here and there. The painting is practically dry on the right hand side here, and I'm using the quinacridone rust and Paynes grey to create these dark silhouetted trees using my size 4 round brush, really building up the detail, especially of some of the larger trees there, and it will really bring out the light behind as well. I decided to add some orange here just because I felt I wanted to bring out some more orange sort of foliage behind these trees around the sun area. So I'm just adding a little bit of yellow as well, so the sun is bleaching the top of the foliage there, and just carefully painting around the sun to bring it out and lifting off with my paper towel any paint on top of the sun area. So I'm just adding a few more darks and details on the left hand side of the painting. It's the right hand side now because I've turned it upside down. I love painting upside down sometimes. I just see the painting differently, shapes and patterns, rather than sort of concentrating on a reference photograph and trying to copy it. I'm sort of creating the painting here and going by my instincts, seeing what's right. I really recommend it. So I'm just adding a few more darks here with my size 4 brush with the Paynes grey and the quinacridone rust. So I'm just adding some reflections in here, painting damp into damp using the Paynes grey and quinacridone rust with hardly any water in it, just a little bit to get the paint moving. And of course the water is still damp here, and I'm just sort of really emphasizing the main sort of tree trunk reflections here. I'm still using my size 4 round brush, and I'm just trying to make sure these are directly underneath the tree and going in the same direction. You may find painting from the side helpful with this as well. And here is the finished painting. I really hope you enjoyed this tutorial, especially using that spritzer bottle. This game-changing trick can be so helpful, especially if your painting is drying too quickly. If you have any questions, please put them in the comments section. And if you'd like to support the content that I create here on YouTube, get access to my weekly exclusive tutorials and downloadable outline sketches, why not think about joining my Patreon membership? Details about the membership can be found in the description below, and you can cancel anytime. Thank you so much for watching this tutorial. Happy sunset painting. Bye for now.